Hold on a second before you start recording.
Too late. I already started. I'll just
Gosh
edit this
dang
part
it.
off.
It's not going to get edited off because I guarantee this is going to be exactly what the podcast is all. What are we
Oh,
talking about tonight?
I thought we were talking about. I don't know. I asked you if we wanted a script, and you were like, "No, let's just do off the cuff. It'll be easier that way."
Yeah, I said two stories. We should have two stories in the wings.
Yeah. So,
Pick two
uh,
stories.
the go kart and your paper. Did
Fantastic.
did you find the taboo paper?
No, I didn't find it. I got rid of that crap.
That's amazing. And honestly, I had completely forgotten about it until you were like, "Oh, I don't like, you're like I don't remember like the stories and stuff." And it was like 2 days later, I was like, "Oh yeah, we wrote a paper together."
That was terrible. I guess we could start there since we're talking about it.
Yeah.
I don't know how we want to frame the picture of what was
Oh.
happening, but I had. Oh, are you struggling?
Sorry, I'm just thinking. Well, whatever. I'm gonna say.
Should
I'm
we do an
record.
intro? Welcome to the Brothers McLaughlin podcast.
Well, I was just wondering if you wanted to update your name from Finn to something else.
Does it say my name?
Yeah,
Oh, look, it says my name.
in fact, I kind of want to edit mine to not have my last name on it. That doesn't matter. It's
Hide self view. Rename! I found the rename button.
there we go. Now I'm just Steven.
There we go.
Uncle Bob. Fine, I'll change mine too.
Come on. Yours should be Spud. If it's not Spud, it should be Spud.
Uncle Spud.
Uncle Spud. Got Uncle Bob and Uncle Spud, the only two uncles that actually have cool nicknames.
That's true.
Yeah,
There's
everybody else got hosed out of that deal. No
seriously.
nicknames. All right.
All right,
Well,
so it was your paper, so I think you should have to introduce at least the setup for how we ended up in the scenario
yeah,
of
that's
writing
true.
it.
We are going to start off by saying that this is for posterity. So judgment should be folded up, put back in your pocket, and just sit there and listen.
I just want to point out that even though this was for a community college paper, both of us did eventually graduate from real universities
Oh,
and
yeah,
got
that
real
is true.
degrees.
Technically, were you in high school or were you in college at that
I was in
point?
high school. I
Okay, good,
Yeah,
good.
I never pulled any all nighters at mom's house after high school.
All right. Well, to set this up, let's see here. I don't know what year it was. Is I got home in '08. Well, I got home
What?
in '07, and then it was the spring of '08. So it had to be the spring of '08. So,
Yeah, that would have been my first summer out of high school then.
yep.
So that's just post senior year. That makes a lot of sense.
No, it was during your senior year because I started January 7th for school.
Mm, got it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that I mean that's a decent story there of how I got that start set up is I got home from my mission and it's another story and tangent, not knowing if I had graduated from high school, which I don't recommend to people. You should actually try. But getting
And
home,
go to graduation and collect your diploma and things
oh,
like
I went to
that.
graduation. I just wasn't supposed to. And I got the little booklet, but it was empty. I
Yeah.
thought that I had like totally cheesed the system. Doesn't work that way. Turns out they mail you your diploma,
Yeah.
which
Oh,
cutting to the chase, turns out they did mail me a diploma. Mom just happened to lose it. Oh, he's gonna, yeah.
I always wondered about that. Oh, you gotta be kidding me! I've knocked over my wall.
Uh,
One moment.
so got home from my mission, St. Louis, Missouri, and I was working right off the bat, and I decided that I was going to be a responsible adult, and it was time to face the music. So I reached out to Chris, who was currently at Salt Lake Community College getting a business degree, and said, "Hey, man, like I need you to sign me up for school. Like I don't know what I'm doing." And true to McLaughlin form, Chris is like, "Yeah, dude, come to my place January 7th." And I was like, "Deal, done." And so I put it on the calendar, I was ready to go. I show up. Chris is living in an apartment with Mike at the time.
I remember that place.
Yeah, it was not a good place. Anyway, We go out to Salt Lake Community College. It turns out January 7th was the first day of classes. So Chris signed me up and registered me for Salt Lake Community College the day classes started. So we walked up and like I was super stoked because I was like, oh, I don't know what's gonna happen. Like I figured I
Yeah.
would have to like test into stuff, but it was a community college and like for all of you that are listening to this, like the internet was not what it was back when I graduated high school, and Salt Lake Community College was definitely not a well-established
Well,
fraternity of
and
academics.
I'd like to point out for everybody that while you may have during high school like visited a college or your parents might have told you what going to school was like, we went in completely blind, every single one of us.
Yeah,
So
100%. Supposedly, though, Mike went to college. I didn't know Mike was actually going to college, but Wynn counts him as like the
as the
one
first, yeah.
blazing the trail, which is, I guess, is true because if Chris went to college because Mike went to college, I went to college because Chris went to college. So
Well, I just remember while Mike was in college, I was still in high school, and he would call me for help with his math homework.
every
and
one of
and
us
this is
did.
like this is way before Zoom. So he'd call me and he would verbally describe his equations, and he didn't have the language for it. So he's like, it's y equals. There's this really long S thing, and I'm like, okay, what are the numbers at the top and bottom of the S thing? He's like, 7. Uh huh. He's like, and it looks like an X. Like,
It, it
okay.
it's a there's a fish on here.
There's
No, that's not
no,
a fish,
there's
Mike.
there's not a fish in math.
No, it's a fish. It's the Jesus fish. I promise.
Well, that's what it looked like when I wrote it down.
Yeah. So we'll get into it with another story when we talk high school days. But I didn't take that whole ACT thing, let alone know I graduated from high school. So I'm walking in completely blind, as Spud said, to Salt Lake Community College. I filled out their application, and what they listed on the application was year. I think the way they phrased it was like year anticipated high school graduation. And so I felt pretty good about not lying because I didn't know if I had graduated high school. I put oh 04.
Definitely
And
anticipated graduating in
yeah, like
04.
I was there. I wore the cap and gown. I wasn't supposed to, but then they they're like, well, like here's $1,200 and welcome to Salt Lake Community College. So then we walked around and actually sat in different classes and I gave out my S number, which was my student number, to get rolled into classes. So obviously the amount of effort that I put in should have told you that I was not a stellar student at this point. That and, the fact that I didn't even know if I had a high school diploma. So I was in a
So
psychology
just before you
class?
get there,
Oh.
was this the year where you asked me to pay for your tuition for you?
Oh yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. Oh my gosh, that's a whole nother entire story. So I signed up. Chris signed me up for classes, and Chris, being a business major, is like, these are the intro classes that you need. So I got like an English class, a CIS class, which was essentially like how to use Microsoft Word, a psychology class. I think that was it. I think it was those three.
And
No,
tennis, right?
no, I
I
did
remember you guys doing a ton of tennis.
we did tennis, but it was in the summertime. But I did tennis because Anthony always told me that he would pick a class that he could look forward to in the school year, and so that was why I would take like a tennis course or something fun.
I should have talked to Tony about going to college. He would have been a
Yeah,
good resource.
seeing as he went and knew what was going on,
Yeah,
unlike our
he had
parents.
actually been to one.
Yeah, he knew what a college was.
Technically, Dad went to a college. I think he got a degree, but
I don't know. I think he just went to a college to pick up on girls.
and he did.
By the stories, it sounded like he did. So I signed up for these classes and didn't pay a ton of attention in any of them. I also that night met my future wife. So I met Jordy.
Was that
the
the same time?
It was a very big day. Okay, I showed up
Holy
at Chris and Mike's apartment at like 7 a.m. I went out to the college. I attended my first 3 classes. I signed up for school. I got home. It was a Monday, and Chris reached out to me. Oh, I went to work. I went to work and I got home after work, and Chris texted me and is like, "Hey man, like we're doing FHE at the singles ward. You've got to come." And after making Chris sign me up for classes and register me for school because I was like the scared little puppy dog, I couldn't turn him down. So I was like, "Oh, I'll go to your weird singles ward thing." And so I showed up and they were splitting us into like different groups.
Yeah, the
And
families. They were breaking you
yeah,
into the
the
families
families.
that night.
Turns out they were splitting people into like age brackets because it was the Millstream ward that had people that were 18 to like 59. Like
Yeah.
it was a different time. It was the Wild West. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it,
like
it wasn't that much better after my mission. We had a like a 32-year-old and an 18-year-old that had paired off together and were getting pretty serious. So that
oh, it
was
was no good.
yeah.
Just
that
no
word never
good.
got any less strange.
So yeah, so I met Jordy that night, which was hilarious because like one of the first things she asked me, she's like, "So what are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I'm in school.
I'm a student. I've got my
I'm
stuff together.
I'm good. I'm gonna be an electrical engineer," which was a tag phrase that I had picked up before my mission because people on your mission always ask you what you're gonna
Yeah.
do.
So what are you gonna do when you get home?
Yeah, so I chose electrical engineer because it had no follow-up questions because nobody knows what
No
those
one knows
are,
anything about electrical engineering. That's true.
including me. I had no idea. So I would always choose that and just kind of move forward with it. So I get into all these classes and I meet this super cute girl, Jordy, my wife. And so she had psychology at the same time that I did. And she would text me all during psychology. And because she was the super hot chick, I was going to text her back. And so I would sit in the back, kind of in the corner, so I could text this girl who I thought was super cute during all of my psychology when I didn't know anything about psychology. And so this is a long-winded way to get to this story,
Oh,
but
and we can't skip over Chris's description of you and Jordy meeting, which was Roberts standing there on the side of the room, just stock still, nervous because he's fresh off his mission and scared around girls, and Jordy like inches over next to him and like
well,
reaches out and
no,
elbows him.
you're totally jumping the gun. That was when I knew she liked me. I
Oh, I
this
thought I
one
thought this was day one for you two.
no, this was I think that was week 2. I think it was
Oh,
week 2.
you're right. I'm really jumping the gun there on
Yeah,
week
yeah.
two.
We went out like 3 times before then. No, anyway. No, so we sat at a table. You weren't far off. I was sitting and staring at the table very hard,
Oh
trying to burn a
no!
hole in it as this girl just talked constantly to me. And she called me Steve because she like her
Mm.
favorite movie was this What's Up Doc where like the guy is called a different name, and so she just figured she would steal a page out of Barbara Streisand's book, which I don't recommend to anybody. So I thought she had a hard time or a mental learning disorder since she couldn't
She's,
remember my name.
you're really cute for a girl that can't remember
Yeah,
names.
like I don't know, something's wrong with you. No, but I just sat there and blushed for an hour and a half while she sat there and talked to me, and she just freaking talked the whole time. She was trying to lay the groundwork, making sure that none of the other girls. Apparently, we'll have my wife as a guest appearance on
Yeah.
this.
And
Tell
say
you
we'll
this
we'll need
story.
we'll need to have her explain how she was like marking her territory and like scaring
Yeah,
everyone else off.
I was the cutest boy she'd ever seen, as the story goes. So this girl texts me all through psychology. The final paper is what we're graded on. It's a 10-page paper, which when you don't know if you've graduated high school and you don't know how to read or write very well, like me, a 10-page paper, it might as well be like the memoirs of somebody important. Like there was no way I was going to be able to do this. It was just
in
impossible.
in your defense, I think the longest paper I ever wrote through all the way through my PhD was like a 6-page paper, and it
Yeah,
was horrendous. Like that
my
was like the hardest project for me.
my graduate degree. Like I got a freaking MBA, and the longest paper I ever wrote was I think it was a 16-page paper, and I had a team of people. Like it wasn't an
Yeah,
individual assignment; it
yeah.
was
You
a
have like
team of
a
us.
project where it's like a group of you work on like a packet together, sort of thing.
Yeah, it's exact, and they like laid out like it was like four-page papers. Like it was cake.
Oh
So I have
man.
this 10-page paper, and since I was texting during class, I don't have a whole lot to go on, and I don't take notes. Like I showed up to school and I didn't bring a pen, paper, or an attitude to learn. Like,
To be fair, basically the same way you went through high school.
yeah, right. Like high school is there's like 2 weeks of like you didn't have anything to do and you'd pick up a pencil on your way through classes.
Which
So
is
it
a
turns
warning
out,
to anyone who listens. If you're bad in high school, start at community college.
yeah, it's way
It's
cheaper.
way cheaper and it's more of a gradual progression.
It's
Minus
more
like this 10-page paper that you had to
more
do.
forgiving, except nobody told the psychology teacher that she was teaching at a community
Yeah,
college.
just avoid psychology. Just
That
general rule, avoid psychology.
find a different fine arts or whatever the crap they're called.
Yeah, whatever.
Humanities? I think it's
Yeah,
humanities.
whatever credit it fulfills.
Oh, the humanities. Anyway, so it's the end of the term. All of my other classes I did fairly well in because I wasn't texting my soon, my future wife
Yeah.
during. But it comes to this psychology paper and I put it off. I put it off a lot. And so we get to this climax of it being due the next day because that's the way that McLaughlin's work. And so I sat down and like anybody who's watched the TED talk about the panic monkey and the master procrastinator or the panic monster with like the instant gratification monkey, it's 100% an accurate statement. So the panic monster is in full swing. I'm sitting at my computer typing, and I think I made it like a page and a half with like double spaced like or
And
widened
it was
widened
slow
margins.
because you
Oh yeah.
hadn't learned to type at that point. It was
Oh, it was I was still
it's
at
like finger pecking with
search and destroy. I can type now, but it's because I've made it through college. So I'm finger pecking along, and lo and behold, as I'm running out of steam because I'm writing about taboos, right? So I'm just trying to write. That was what the
social mores.
so
I remember that now because I had no idea what a moray was back then.
no,
You're
I thought it
because
was an eel.
yeah, you said you were like yeah, like this is about social mores, and I'm like, what on earth is that? He's like, and taboos. Like I know what that word means.
I
I
know what a
think.
taboo is. So some of the descriptions that had happened in class had definitely resurfaced in my paper. And so I'm struggling, right? Just typing one letter at a time. And Spud walks in from it was probably a high school date or it was just high school in general. I don't know. It was late at night though.
Yeah, no, it would have probably been me coming home from. Oh, I don't know when. What day of the week do
Maybe
you
it
think
was
this would have been? Because
I,
it might have been me coming home from like Mutual or something on a Wednesday
mutual
night.
swim practice. Like Spud was in all kinds of things back then. So he was the water polo, like it could have been any of these.
Yeah,
So he comes walking into the messy house that we call our home, and he's like, "What's up, Bob? How you doing?" And I'm like, "Man, I'm struggling. I have 9 more pages, like 8.5 more pages to get through." And it was probably 9 o'clock. And so naturally, I begged my youngest brother, who had come to my rescue a number of times. And as you heard, almost everybody always did, whether it was math homework or anything else.
I also took a typing class in junior high, so I was a really good typist.
Yeah. So out of everyone in the family, Spud could type the fastest. So he sat down and I started dictating to him. And I think 2 paragraphs later, I had run out of material.
Yeah,
So we maybe
but
made 2 pages with what I had written.
and it was about that point that I had become very confident that I fully understood what the paper was supposed to be about. And so Robert slowed down with talking, and I started speeding up with typing, and I blew through like half a page explaining something to do with taboos. And I'm burning along, and I'm doing great, and I'm like, yeah, like, taboos are things you're not supposed to do. And I was taking like US history at the time, so I started like weaving some politics into it, and was talking about, sort of taboo political systems. In other words, Nazis. I started talking about Nazis in his taboo paper, and I was going along.
Slavery, I think, came
Yeah,
up in there.
probably slavery was in there, and I'm going along, and suddenly I hit a brick wall at the end of like the third page, and I'm sitting there just sort of staring at it, and I'm like, I I don't know where to go from here. But by then you had rested up, and
Yeah,
like,
so
and you
I
jumped back on and started typing again.
so I grabbed a snack because Spud's like, "Oh, I've got this. I'm gonna write as much as I've got." And I was like, "Oh, you're the man." So I grab a snack because I've been at the computer. I mind you, 3 pages. Okay, 3 pages. It had been like 3 hours of me being at the computer, and it was 3 pages long. And Spud only typed for like half an hour because he actually could type fast, but he burned out quickly, not knowing anything about the subject
Yeah,
and
I
not
really
being in
come
the class.
come to the end of my knowledge really quickly on topics like this.
So after grabbing a quick snack and kind of getting a break from the computer, I was like, "Hey, you're the man. Thanks for helping out." I get back on and I go back to like chicken scratch typing, trying to get through it. I get like 3 or 4 paragraphs in and start running out of material. And what I had done is I had read the last 3 sentences in Spud's last paragraph, and I had based all of my understanding of which direction he was going with the paper off of those 3 sentences. And so I wrote pretty much another page, maybe over a page, in a very different direction than what he had done. But since we were against the time clock because it was
Yeah,
due, I think it was due at midnight.
yeah.
I don't
It
even
was
think
like
it
due
was
at
due the
midnight or
next day.
something like that. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, there
And I
was.
had started it. I had started at like 7, so it was probably 10 o'clock at this point. So burning through my expansive knowledge of, because I saw that he had discussed slavery, so I talked about slavery, and I had talked about I think that we moved into the thought process of kind of the no, maybe I saw that you had said something about African Americans, and I moved into uh like voodoo. I had talked about stuff down in like Louisiana, and kind of ended towards slavery, and then I had run out of gas again. So it was, and I was getting nervous because we were getting close to the deadline, and Spud jumped back in after my 35 minutes of typing. And
Sprinted through another page just without thought, basically, just typing away. Like, I think about it now, and I feel like that paper had to have just been like redundant sentence after redundant sentence from me.
so unfortunately, after Spud kind of exhausted himself one more time, I went back and kind of read the last sentence and wrapped it up. But we made our 10 pages.
Yeah, we hit the target. Like, I remember by the end it was like I would type, and when I'd run out of steam, I would just like flop and lay down on the floor while you would type until you were like, I can't do this anymore. And I like stand back up and go back to
So
typing.
near the end of the paper, it wasn't paragraphs or pages that we were switching on. It was pretty much
Yeah, it was like
sentences.
sentence by sentence after a while. I'm just like, I don't even know anymore. We just need distance.
and and at this point, we didn't have the time to read what each other were writing. So as one of us would kind of fall back, we'd just like gurgle something out and be like, "Oh, this is what I said," or "Oh, this is where I'm going." And we got to the 10 pages, and I think that we had like an exact amount of 7 minutes left before midnight. And so I jumped on Canvas. I think we were still using Juno at that point. Our internet was
Yeah,
still,
I don't even know. I think it was some kind of dial up
it was dial
still.
up, which you
So,
guys probably don't know anything about, but it was a race against the clock to get onto the internet and then get to Canvas and get it submitted. And so as I submit the paper that we did not reread, we did not proofread, and that we did,
And
and we
probably
didn't
had
have,
about a page and a half of like conclusion paragraphs repeating.
there was, and we weren't using Microsoft Word because we didn't have Word. I think we were
No, it would have
using,
been Word Perfect probably.
yep, like
So
WordPerfect, but you guys probably don't even know what that is. But yeah, so
I'm pretty sure that's where copy and paste come from, though.
yeah,
So that's a
so
useful.
I submitted the paper just before midnight. I thanked my younger brother profusely, but then I asked him some questions, follow-up questions. I'm like, hey, so like you got some weird stuff in the beginning, like where did you go from there? And as we started comparing notes, began to realize the wild differences that we had
So,
in our approaches to this paper.
so I imagined it sort of like when you switch off writers. Normally, it's like tacking into the wind, sort of thing. Like you're going one way, you turn a little bit. This was more like going in a direction and then moving up instead, or going straight down or backwards a
Yeah.
little bit, or
The sailboat becomes a submarine and then an airplane, and
yeah.
then it starts going to the Bermuda Triangle and nobody knows what happens.
Yeah, I really do kind of want to see that paper again just to see what that was like.
I'm sure it's somewhere. I did break into my old canvas with the University of Utah, but I don't know if I remember anything about
Yeah, I was
uh
gonna say all my BYU stuff has all disappeared
it's
by now.
long since gone.
Yeah.
Well, as a conclusion, I will say that not only did I pass that class, but that paper got like a B. written written straight through in about 5 hours with no research done whatsoever, having no understanding of the topic that we were writing of, and having a high school student and an underperforming community college student put it together.
B,
B.
that's B material right
B material.
there.
B material. I think most of that B came from Spud, but yeah, I'll give him most of that B. But I did get a B. I passed that class. I
was
didn't pass
there
with flying colors, but
was there a point with that one where we talked about penguins?
I
Because
think
I swear
so.
there's something that stands out in my mind as like either it was one of those like gimmick things where it's like, oh, write a sentence about penguins in the middle that doesn't connect to anything to see if your teacher's reading. But I don't feel like we were thinking
No,
that way at the
no.
time.
Unfortunately, from what I remember, and this was years ago at this point, guys, so we apologize because it's 2022 at this point.
Yeah, that would have
But
been 14 years ago now,
yeah,
or a
luckily.
little more. Holy cow!
Um, so it, I believe that the main topics that we discussed, because that night after I submitted the paper, randomly we were both very awake because we sat and ate dinner or whatever you would call a midnight
Pro-
snack,
Probably.
and we discussed it. And I do remember talking about how Nazis, voodoo, slavery, and penguins had come up. And I think it was because you had watched something about penguin behavior, and it was something about one of them doing something and they kind of get outcasted, and that was the loose connection to the taboo subject.
Yeah, I probably something along the lines of like if you destroy an egg, you get kicked out of the herd or
Yeah,
something. I don't
either way,
know.
the fact that there were penguins brought up in that paper about taboos was a problem, just a problem. So moral of this story for you guys, because hopefully we can have a moral with each of these stories as we
Sure.
record them. We'll throw a moral out there. It's always great to get help from a sibling. It's always great to be that person because Spud solidified himself in that aspect, whether for good or for bad. Uh, where I felt that I could depend on him, which I mean, it was always that way with us boys, right? We always knew we had each other's backs. But the
Mhm.
moral I would say is that waiting until the last minute might be easier to find that motivation to actually get your work done, but your paper's not going to turn out to be a paper that you're going to save or try to find very hard, if at all.
you're you're not gonna frame that one.
It's not going to work. So procrastination is just it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. And the stress, all of the cortisol that dumps into your system at that one moment could be just divvied up into little bits. So it's much better if you just do it ahead of time. I did become a very different student after I got married, seeing how my wife would study and how she would approach school. And so we'll talk about those as we move forward. But moral of the story, sure, you can procrastinate and sometimes it'll work out, but sometimes you write a paper about Nazis and penguins, and there's a teacher that's got my name on that paper that we'll never forget and probably uses it to this day about what not to write about when you're in the psychology class.
But, I mean, maybe they've published their own paper on it because they tried to psychoanalyze apparently a schizophrenic writer.
It's true. It's true. It could have been the reason that I got a B is so that she wasn't fearful that we would come and attack her. So, not that I ever said anything about that, but if I read our paper, I wouldn't believe that person was sane.
Yeah, no. Definitely doesn't feel like one person wrote it.
All right. Yeah, that's the psychology paper.
Yeah.
It looks like we've got about a minute.
Yeah,
So
we've got under a minute, so we'll have to come back. I was gonna say the moral of the story really dovetails well into the go-kart story about not procrastinating.
yeah, for next week. All
Yeah,
right.
next time. All right.
So
Have a good one.
over and out.
We'll see you later.
Bye.